Good morning everyone and welcome to the CISI webinar, SMCR, Learnings from the Banking Sector and the Role of Technology. I'm Richard Walsh, an Associate Partner with Ernst & Young in the regulatory practice. My focus is on governance, conduct and culture. I've worked on a number of SMCR engagements with banks, Solvency II and FCA solar regulated firms, both from an implementation and an assurance perspective. The objectives of the webinar today are: 1, explore the practical lessons learned from the banking sector that has been in the regime since 2016, and 2, discuss the role of technology and how it can help firms, 1, implement SMCR and maintain a compliant environment. We have a lot to get through in the next 45 minutes, and to help me, I have representations from the FCA, the banking sector, and the technology practice. So, for introductions, Andrew.
Thank you. My name's Andrew Otter. I've been with the regulator for near on 15 years. I've worked across various functions, including authorisations, supervision, the data function, and several implementation projects across regulation. I've been working directly with accountability for nearly 6 months, but I've been working with accountability through various of those functions I mentioned earlier for the last couple of years.
My name's Victoria Swaysland. I work at Barclays. I've been there 8 years and, very similar to Andrew, worked in a number of different functions. I was privileged to be the Programme Director for implementing the senior manager regime into Barclays, so started on it in 2015, supported by a really fantastic team of experts who helped make that journey as successful as it could be.
Morning everybody, my name's Carl Redfern. I'm the founder and compliance director for Redland Business Solutions. We're a reg tech company. We've been a reg tech company for 20 years, a long time before the term was invented. We sell software to help firms comply with their people risk and regulatory obligations, including specifically the accountability regime. I think I first got involved with accountability 5 years ago now, and I've done almost nothing since. So I'm quite pleased. I'm quite pleased that we're finally beginning to see the end of the journey in sight.
Thank you. Okay, so moving to questions, Andrew. What should firms be focusing on in order to be ready to be compliant with the regime?
Okay, thank you, Richard. Recently, I and my colleagues in the accountability team have been doing lots of work and roundtables with banks, insurers, supervisors in the FCA who've all been working on and impacted by previous implementations of the regime and are looking forward to the implementation of the 9th of December date. There are 3 key messages I think I want to give to the audience today. The first of which is to start planning early. It's really important to start talking to your senior managers, the people who are going to have that personal responsibility at the firm, to start understanding that it's their personal responsibility to start driving this as a better culture in their firms. It's not to be underestimated how important it is to start planning early. The second message is, Carl, you mentioned there about the end of the journey. So the 9th of December is implementation date for this part of the regime. But of course, 9th of December isn't the end. That's just day 1, really, of the ongoing SMCR regime. It's important that we don't just stop working on that date, both internally and externally for the FCA. This is something that has legs, is something that we need to work on together, embedding that culture, making sure we comply long term. The third message, kind of linked to that, is that this isn't just a compliance exercise, and success shouldn't just be determined by we have our SMFs in place, we have our certification in place in 2020. Success is about embedding this throughout the firm, driving better culture. The implementation, by all means, can be the focus now can be a HR-led project, bringing in compliance consultants, people like that. But to really embed this, the rules, the culture guidance need a really good level of engagement at all levels in the firm. So it's not just a box ticking exercise. And they're the 3 key messages I think I'd ask firms to make sure they're complying with and thinking about.
Thank you. Okay, sort of moving on then to the practical challenges that firms face. Victoria, when you were running and implementing SMCR for Barclays, what are the challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
I mean, I would echo a lot of what Andrew has said, that implementing SMR is not a checklist project. You're not going to get to December the 9th and say, oh, I've ticked all my milestones, we're all now done, great, the project's green, close it. It's really about cultural change because, as Andrew said, it's about personal accountability and it's at senior manager level, but it's also throughout the firm. And it's really important to focus on what we would call the -1s of an SMR because they play a very critical role in demonstrating the reasonable steps for a senior manager. It's really about looking at your DNA and really embedding it into it. And I can't overemphasize the importance of very senior leadership with this. It has to come from the top and it has to go all the way down to the bottom of the organisation. You know, and at Barclays, we've done a lot of work in terms of helping people to really understand their responsibilities from exco right down to being a bank teller or working in a call centre. So, as Andrew said again, the 9th of December, you could, you know, officially your checklist project is finished, but that is when your journey really does begin. And, you know, we've been on it for 3 years now. We're still evolving, we're still implementing, we're still embedding that cultural change. So that for us is a big one. The second one, as Andrew mentioned, is this, it's complex. It is complex, and you really need to look at your organisation, and you need to make sure that, in effect, your house is in order. You know, look at your executive governance. How does that support your senior managers? Look at how you're structured. You know, one of the things we would say is try and avoid shared accountability because it's quite complex, to understand, but also to demonstrate in terms of reasonable steps. Look at your structures. And like I said before, also really focus on your senior managers and their direct reports because these guys are really important in helping to demonstrate the accountability for the senior manager.
Thank you. Carl?
So I think I would start by saying that I agree with everything Vicky and Andrew have said. It is a commencement date, not an end date.
Yes.
And the breadth of the implications of SM&CR within most firms is not trivial.
No.
You can look at a mid-sized organisation and easily identify more than 100 policies or processes within your business that will be impacted by the introduction of SM&CR. So, you know, don't underestimate for firms that are planning today how to get ready for this commencement date at the end of this year. Don't underestimate the breadth of that implication and that impact and how many people will be involved or need to be involved in getting ready.
I think it's also worth saying, Carl, as well, just from talking to people in the industry, one of the pieces of feedback I've had is we're focusing on the senior managers. That's our focus now. And we'll worry about certification and we'll worry about conduct rules much later on the project. Don't.
Yeah.
The senior manager piece, it's the most complex and it does take up the most time. But certification, if you need to build technology solution, you need that lead time. And conduct rules, there's a lot of complexity in that.
Well, I was about to say, and I couldn't agree more, that the senior manager conduct rules actually, although they are personally going to apply to a very few individuals in your business, the implications on the ongoing operational structure of your firm of those senior manager conduct rules are really significant. Yeah. Almost more impact than the individual conduct rules, although they will apply to many, many more people, because of the cascade effect of that additional rigor and control that those new senior manager conduct rules oblige. You know, this obligation for effective delegation, the obligation for effective systems and controls in a senior manager's personal area of responsibility means that, just what you were saying, Vic, the ripple down effect on their direct reports, on the people who they are delegating some of that responsibility to, and then to the people that they're delegating that responsibility to, really does begin to sort of ripple out across your business. I don't know if you would agree with that, Richard.
I would, and I think one of the challenges we've seen, particularly in implementation, is around consistency of approach. So making sure that you have a documented traceability of interpretations and that they are applied across the business in a consistent manner.
So if I may as well, so an observation that we've made from some of our work with previous with firms that have previously implemented the regime is what they've tried to do sometimes is just fold in the conduct rules into their existing values, which is good. Their values should cover, hopefully, lots of what SMCR's looking to achieve. However, it shouldn't replace the conduct rules. If a regulator, if anybody comes and looks at those values, there should be a really clear line. And right, it can be a version of the conduct rules, but the conduct rules are there to be used and to be followed. So please don't just assume that your existing values are enough to mean that you don't need to talk or think about the conduct rules.
I think that plays nicely into one of the key considerations that we found is communication and education is key, and that's not just a one-off education process. It's consistency in the run-up to the regime going live, but also thereafter, so that staff continue to understand that they have accountabilities as well as the senior managers, and that helps change culture and embed the culture.
Absolutely.
And I think for us, one thing that really helped us was by having a cross-functional project team. So we had regular engagement and communication with ExCo, and you need that for the steer in terms of how you're going to implement this. We had a steerco. The steerco was made up of very senior individuals across the bank, again, who could help us. This is our interpretation. This is what we think we need to do. Does that work in your areas? The last piece was around having a really good cross-functional team who work together. And it's not just for the project, it needs to continue. Mm-hmm. So that will be compliance, HR, technology, communications, legal. And you all become, you go on this journey together, you become experts together, and that partnership will remain from when you start the project. And for us in Barclays, that partnership is still there now. Because again, it's this embedded, it takes time, and it is continual, especially if you do something like structural change, organisation changes. You need to look at how you're doing, for example, state responsibilities. I really would say that is a key pivotal part. Also, it is complex and it is a new area. Utilise trade bodies. We have AFME, we have UK Finance. I know the FCA, you run round tables.
Yes, that's right.
I can't emphasise the value of attending those, just to find out what are people's views, what are the challenges people are seeing, what can I learn in terms of best practice.
Thank you. I think if we sort of move on from that, there are some practical challenges around transitioning from a projects-based environment into BAU. What are the key considerations you would see around how you manage that change and move a project into a BAU environment and then manage that on an ongoing basis where you have got a different set of resource, a different set of sponsorship?
So one of the things we have done since the project was disbanded is we've really looked at our target operating model. So the project could be led from HR, it could be led from compliance, but actually that may not be the natural home. And this is about accountability. So you need to look at, actually, should more be sitting in the first line once the project is closed and you're, in effect, you're embedding it. So look at the roles and responsibilities, look at your target operating model and go, actually, does this help embed what the regime is meant to be doing? The other piece, statement of responsibilities, you'll get them all prepared for the 9th of December. And actually there might be organisation changes, or actually when you start getting into it and people are working through their reasonable steps, they might say, do you know what, how the SAW is being drafted, it's not working. Let's have a look and redo that. And there's nothing wrong with re-looking at your SAWs and going, do I need to change my approach, my language?
Yep. I think that from the number of clients that we've interacted with over the last few years on accountability, the amount of change the other side of the commencement date caught an awful lot of firms out, I think, surprised them. They thought, but I think amongst a lot of the banks and insurers, there was almost an expectation that once they'd done the heavy lifting and they'd done the head scratching and worked out actually who should be accountable for what and written it down, then these things would go in the cupboard and stay there. And yeah, they would need to review them every year, but that would be fine. And actually, some of our clients probably published a new version of their responsibility map 12 or 15 times in the first 18 months. And certainly we're drafting new SAWs. It was almost a sport because the senior managers were working out, once all this was written down and they were applying it in the real world, it actually was making the firm think much more about its governance arrangement and whether this is in practical reality correct and working in the best way. And so they started to move on and update and change. And that created a lot more of this kind of governance collateral, this product that they needed to keep records of and manage version control. And I think it surprised a lot of banks and insurers.
And I think that use test and embedding is key, and it can be a challenge. So you're not just looking at day one compliance, it's ongoing compliance, but firms do change shape. They do have restructuring, individuals' roles move. One of the challenges we've seen is on that vertical line between senior managers around how you define where their role starts and stops, particularly where they're interdependent on each other. And so actually testing that and using things like scenario testing to see if your infrastructure works can be very helpful and would actually take you from that, yes, we've got a paper-based, process-based exercise, into bringing it to life and see if it naturally works.
I mean, we still use scenario testing even now, in terms of we'll come up with a scenario, we'll talk to our senior managers and we'll say, tell us how you do your reasonable steps. If this happened, where does the accountability start and end? So again, it's this ongoing journey. We did them right at the beginning when we were drafting the SORs, but we still keep doing them now as part of our refreshers. Because again, it keeps people just thinking about my reasonable steps. And as you say, it's that start and end.
There's nothing kind of substitutes for experience, of course, and talking to colleagues or people who can support through compliance or trade bodies and people. I think that's a really good piece of advice. We've also recently, bit of FCA publicity here. We've recently released a guide to SORs and maps as well, responsibility maps, and that's very much looking to build a bit of a bridge there to help people see real examples or close approximations of real examples of how different firms or different maps might look, the kind of text you might use, and they aren't rules in terms of you have to do it like this, but they're examples to help guide. We've also got the guide for solo firms, which goes through a bit of detail about reasonable steps or what the expectation is from the regulator. So again, they're not necessarily replacing or dictating anything. What they're there is to help as a guide, to help point you in the right direction, help you out with making some decisions about what this might look and feel like. And we've all mentioned about preparing early. There's nothing really to prevent anybody starting to play around with their SORs and maps, starting to put things together, trying out different things, talking to their senior managers or the people that will be on those to see, well, how does this feel? Does it feel like something we can keep up? Yeah. Does it feel like something that reflects what my actual responsibilities are? So we would encourage firms of all sizes to start thinking about doing that now, just to get ahead and not wait until the last moment to start doing this.
I think you're right there. I mean, in terms of reasonable steps, we would recommend that people start their reasonable steps in Q3 to Q4. So when it goes live, it's already up and running. And I think one of the challenges you sometimes will hear from individuals is, oh, this is more bureaucracy. I've got to put a lot more processes in to do my reasonable steps. Reasonable steps should be how you run in your business area. As it is. It should be BAU. You might need to do some enhancements on what you're currently doing, but it should just, again, it's part of the DNA. You shouldn't be doing special things just to demonstrate reasonable steps. And it should be your operations.
We found that if you positively leverage your existing infrastructure, you have half of the battle in terms of demonstrating reasonable steps. Something we haven't touched on, but I think is equally important, is the certified population and management of that certified population, because they tend to be, the larger firms, a broader population of individuals, and how you keep track of them, ensure they've got the correct fitness and proprietary considerations around breach reporting and regulatory referencing can actually be quite challenging. How have you managed or supported the embeddedness of that?
So we have quite a large certification population, and what we're doing now is looking at our approved population to work out how we're actually going to transition them across to the certification. We've already started that work. We already have a technology tool, which, to be honest, helps us in terms of workflow for managing certification. In terms of conduct rule breaches, for us, we already have it in place. So people who are going to become certified are already aware of the obligations, which does make it easier for us. But as I say, if you're going to build a technology tool to manage this certified population, give yourself a minimum of 6 months to build it. Regulatory referencing is complex. It really does need working groups covering HR, legal, compliance to work it through. I think it's a challenge
Yeah.
in the industry in terms of getting the references back on time with the detail you need, and also we understand there's data protection issues which we're working through, and I think that's where using your trade bodies or or cross-functional working groups is fantastic, just to give you more insight to help manage those challenges.
I think I would echo as well, for the certification regime, there is a significant amount of interlock between existing performance appraisal process and performance management. And for those staff who are already enrolled subject to training and competence or knowledge and competence obligations, again, there's an interdependency between those processes, the way that you monitor those staff in order to comply with those obligations, and the end of year or once a year annual renewal of a certificate. I think that the information that is necessary as part of that competence assessment process and fitness and propriety process for certifying staff is quite a lot of that information is available from those existing processes, from your performance. Before you certify somebody, you need to know in detail where they were in their last performance appraisal. You need to know if there's any training and competence issues been identified or remedial actions. And that dependency on information at the point of certification is something that firms need to think about. How will the people who are certifying their staff have access to that kind of holistic understanding of the individual in question?
The employee journey is vital for certification, and that's where you have to work very closely with HR, as you say, to align the two.
And I think that you can get some genuine value out of your existing infrastructure. You've got processes in place probably in your firm today to manage performance appraisals, to do T&C or knowledge and competence assessments. But in some firms, maybe the rigor of those pre-existing processes needs a bit of a revisit. In some firms, the evidence base that is supporting those existing processes might need a bit of bolstering in order to give you firm ground for certification. And that's, I guess I would say this, but that is one area where technology can help. You can look at systems in order to collate that information efficiently and effectively and publish it to the right people in a timely fashion.
I think that leads nicely into the next question around how technology can help with the broader SMCR compliance on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, so I think that there is a lot of value. Technology is good at automating process, at giving you auditable record keeping. There's a lot of things that technology can, a lot of benefit technology can bring to an organization. But it is pointless to put systems in for system's sake, and you mustn't throw away your existing infrastructure. You've already got solutions for some of this stuff. Find ways to gain benefit from those. But there are specialist applications, like ours, for example, and others that are out in the market that are now relatively mature. They've had several years of supporting banks and insurers, and they may well be worth looking at. The business case is surprisingly easy because of the volume of people involved. If you're certifying 100 people, the manual process and the amount of time that takes without some sort of system support can make it very expensive.
And Carl, I think you mentioned, you've known some clients to have 15 versions of a SOAR in the first year due to organisational changes. And when you start going into this, you might think you're only going to update a SOAR maybe once a year. But actually, when you are doing 15 changes for one person, or you have a small organisational change which could impact 10 different SOARs, it actually becomes very time consuming. You also get version control issues. But also the other thing you need to be able to demonstrate is the different signed off versions. So that if there was something happen and there was an investigation and somebody came to you saying, actually, can you give me every SOAR that related to these individuals over a particular period of time? You need to be able to have those at hand.
That auditability is really critical.
Yeah.
And how would the regulator view this?
So absolutely agree with the points that we're making here again. From a regulator point of view, we don't mind if it's a bespoke system that a firm builds itself, if it's something off of the shelf, as it were. The key point that goes for really any technology solution that helps a firm to comply with regulation is that just because you have technology in place or because you have that resource in place, it doesn't mean that the responsibility for complying with regulation goes away. You cannot outsource that responsibility. So if there is a system solution that's tried and tested, that as a firm you're satisfied it's going to allow you to track changes, to make sure that you can comply with the rules, then that sounds positive. So you make a decision commercially if that's right for you. But what you have to do is make sure that you remember that it's your responsibility to comply with the rules. It's your responsibility to make sure that if there is a breach or something falls down, that you have the systems, the audit trail, the processes in place to be able to detail why that's happened, look back on it and meet your obligations as a regulated firm. Absolutely, you should go for systems that make sense. You should do checks to make sure that they tick off the boxes you want them to tick off and meet the rules that you need to comply with. But as a regulator, our primary focus to say isn't the system that you use, it's making sure that you're not outsourcing your kind of responsibility, personal responsibility for complying, and that system of course can facilitate success in terms of complying.
And that's broader than just compliance with the regime, is any outsourced
Absolutely,
activity.
yeah. Anything really that you outsource.
And I think that's one of the key things that you should be looking for from technology. It gives you an opportunity to give some confidence and certainty to your board and
Yes.
your senior managers that in their area of responsibility,
You can see it.
all of the telltales are green, all of the key indicators are positive, that proactively people are doing what they need to do in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
That if you can put a solution in that will help deliver that across a business, then culturally you're getting much closer to the objective of SM&CR.
Yeah, it allows time and space. If you know, so even if they're all red, at least you can track why they're red.
Yes.
But it allows you time and space then to start focusing on, okay, if I know that those parts taken care of, I can focus on how do we train better, how do we embed this better. Hopefully that's how that will work. The system should be a tool to help facilitate the progress of this in your
The
firm.
whole regime's about people, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's a bit counterintuitive, but technology can give you, implementing technology can give you the space within your firm to focus on your people.
One would hope so, yes.
Yeah.
And looking to that and broader compliance, what MI or monitoring metrics do you think firms should be considering, Andrew, to demonstrate compliance in SMCR?
Well, so we set out in the rules and in the guides the different reporting regimes in terms of, for conduct breaches, for example. As a supervisor, if I was going to a firm or engaging with a firm over, at my desk, over the telephone or face to face, I'm looking for good, accurate records. I'm looking for systems that people can engage with and that people can interrogate and show that compliance. I'm looking for how things are reported up the line to the board and how that confidence is bred throughout the firm. And it's not just a paper that the CEOs outsource someone else. I don't need to pay attention to this, but there's a depth to it that means that people understand exactly what they're reading, what their responsibility is, what they're signing off. And again, you could lift and shift that to various different regimes, to be honest, under the regulator. But that accuracy and detail of records, audit trails, and of course complying with the reporting that we require for our Gabriel system or other means from firms, either soon after an event, if there's a conduct breach, for example, or on the yearly reporting cycle that we've put out there.
So an assurance angle is quite key in being able to have traceability and actually tick back.
Yeah, you'd hope that,
MI.
yes, you'd hope that if there's something to unpick, that the firm that we're talking to or compliance consultants talking to or the firm are talking about it internally, they're able to unpick it and trace back exactly where a fault may have happened, why it happened, of course, and then under SMCR, the person with the personal responsibility can go, right, okay, I'm not ignoring that. I'm able now to, because I can understand forensically what happened, I can fix the source issue, the root cause of that problem and build up. And I think MI is really important to be able to do that, to be able to research that and to be able to really understand what the lesson is to be learned, how to evaluate that and then correct it so it doesn't happen again.
And again, and if this is about cultural change, if you just take conduct rules, we have a regulatory obligation to report to you annually.
Yes.
But actually, we look at them monthly. We look at, in terms of volumes, we look at the type of conduct rule breaches and which business area they're occurring, because it actually starts to give you insight into particular areas to say, is there a trend here? Are they going up? Is it a particular type of conduct rule breach? Do we need to relook at something internally? So to make sure you've got that type of MI. The other piece to think about is employee surveys. We talked earlier on around this is about everybody at all levels of the firm understanding their responsibilities and accountabilities. And one way you can assess that is actually in employee surveys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ask the question, do you think your manager understands their personal accountability? Do you understand what you are responsible for? And again, you can start to see the cultural shift.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the challenges we have seen in that space is around capability and capacity of individuals. So if you were to talk to a senior manager, what MI and information do they have around the capacity within their team? Are there vacancies? Do they actually have the skill set and the tools available to them to undertake their roles? And that's a softer set of MI, but I think it's a key reporting consideration. And when you're looking at reasonable steps, something that shouldn't be overlooked.
No.
Looking more broadly then to day one implementation, so for solo regulated firms, December this year, Victoria, if you were really considering what are the key activities you would say that need to be stood up now if you're going to achieve day one compliance and structure for the next 2 to 3 years?
I would aim for readiness Q3, which comes back to what you were saying. Try and start it early. So try and get everything as ready as you can for Q3. Something's always going to happen after that date, but try and aim for an end of September date. The second thing I would say is, like you mentioned, start doing your SOARs now. Start doing your map now. Start building it, because just don't overemphasize sometimes how long this can take. So to start building that now. Get your house in order. So if you have a board and it doesn't have all the people on it, start that now, get the people in. If you've got gaps in your executive structure, again, fill those gaps now. Start engaging with the approved persons now so that they understand what it will mean to be a senior manager and how you're going to get them transferred across. And and I keep saying this, make sure you have some type of steerco or cross-functional working group to work through this. So you're all in it together to get to that end date.
Yeah. I'd agree pretty much with everything that you said. We plan to issue some quite detailed communications on a regular basis, starting hopefully early on in the summer. The intention of those communications will be all about helping firms prepare for day one. So part of that will be, we will tell firms which category, be it enhanced, core or limited scope, that we think they're in based on our internal data and MI and reporting that we've received. That's what we think, and there's some science behind that. But again, it's the firm should determine if that feels right, if that looks right. You can use the rules, use the guide for solo firms that we produced to see, okay, do you meet those tests? And then start preparing in that band. So if you're an enhanced firm, there's a more detailed regime or version of the regime that you follow, a different set of SMFs you need to think about, prescribed responsibilities. So have a think about that. If you're a core firm, again, think about what that means and how you meet those obligations. Start preparing, using the regime where you can earlier, if that's possible, to help you, say, not just meet the bare minimum on day one, but actually start building to go past day one as well and embedding that regime. But yeah, I'd agree with lots of what Vicky said there.
Thank you, Carl.
I think I would highlight the attitude to risk of the business and the senior management team. I think that there has been a real shift, cultural shift, from FCA, which is laudable. FCA are publishing an awful lot more guidance than they ever have before, and that's really helpful. But it still leaves, and in some instances the rules are very, very clear, but there are still a lot of areas where the rules require interpretation. What does this rule mean for your firm?
Yes.
And the way that the firm chooses to interpret that rule will colour the tone of the project that is preparing the firm to be ready for the commencement date, and also the processes for BAU beyond that. So the firms need to think about their attitude to risk. How do we want to set about interpreting the impact and implications of these rules? Because that will determine, because so many people, so many processes, so much of business as usual operations are impacted by SM&CR. The firms need to set that sort of underlying tone for the right way to respond. And when you look at the certification population, one of the things to think hard about is the impact on the managers of your certified staff. Because these are the guys who tomorrow are effectively responsible for the compliance of with the regime, because they will be the people determining fitness and propriety or assessing competence for those certified staff that are reporting to them. So you need to be equipping your supervisors and line managers with enough understanding of the regime and its impact and implications to effectively discharge those responsibilities on your behalf.
And I think it's also important about, we keep talking about cultural change, and it is about implementing this with the spirit it was intended.
Yes.
Not by the letter.
I think so. Two of the phrases that come to mind when I think about SMCR. So the first one we've used several times, and we've reflected on about the personal responsibility that everybody who's impacted or brought into this regime has now, but certainly more recognisable going forward for the 9th of December as SMCR comes in. The other side there is a really interesting, a whole other sort of debate about how the rule book as it is, the FCA, there's stories about if you printed it off how tall it would be. And of course, that's still doesn't mean that every rule can be tailored the way it's written for every different type of firm. And even firms that do, on paper, the same type of business are very different depending geographically where they are, who works for them, the customer base and so on. One of the things we try to do is publish more guidance now to help firms with that interpretation to make it work for them while still maintaining compliance. The other phrase that comes to mind is around culture and driving better culture. But we understand that the regulator that culture isn't a one-size-fits-all. And it is for a firm. We don't want to restrict a firm's ability to develop its own culture that means it can thrive and provide, a safe, sound business that means that there isn't consumer harm, or there can be, that people feel comfortable with their personal responsibility. So hopefully, as you said there, Cole, the guidance we're publishing, the tone of communications, that's coming through. We understand that there is different types of culture, that it isn't one size fits all, but also that message about personal responsibility is really coming through, and it sounds like that's landing relatively well.
And I think making sure you structure for success now, so really understanding what are the requirements to your point around traceability, understanding what your current operating model is, so the processes, procedures, technology you've got in place, and then taking a stand back and truly undertaking a gap analysis around where you want to get to, your target state for day one, but also into the future. Is that sustainable? Are you going to be able to manage it when you move from a BAU to a project environment? Is a key consideration and shouldn't be overlooked. I think if you look then to the broader regime, some of the considerations that should be taken into account around what will you do in terms of your annual SMCR certification, the wider activities that you need to take place. How have you managed that from the banking side?
So for our senior managers, we have what we call an annual refresher training. So that will cover, again, their obligations under their conduct rules. We talk about reasonable steps. We talk about best practice. For our certified population, we do recertification. We have a particular, we start it in Q4, it finishes in Q1. And it's very communication driven. We have the individuals doing their recertifications, and as Carl mentioned, the line managers declaring that these individuals are fit and proper. We're just starting this year our conduct rule refresher training that goes out globally to every single individual in the bank. This will be, I think it's the third or fourth time we've run it. So again, if you have a project team and you stand it down, this type of activities don't stop; that they continue. We just in Q3 we have certification training again to remind people what are their obligations. We have handbooks for employees on certification and conduct rules. Again, they are refreshed annually and published so that anybody can access them.
I think as well that if you're a solo regulated firm looking to get ready for December, probably given the time of year, you've just finished a round of performance appraisal, and that will give you a bedrock for next year's certification. So wherever you've got to with your existing performance appraisals, you've probably just had your last chance to get your house in order in time for your certification regime obligations. So take the results of that recent performance management, if that's what you've just done, look at where you are with training and competence and knowledge and competence and similar, and give yourself enough time to kind of get your population stable and ready for the point where you are responsible for certifying them in their role.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're coming up to time now, but for me, I suppose in terms of summary and key messages, this is around make sure you start structuring your program now. This isn't a journey to day one, so December this year. This is an ongoing journey. It's going to take 2 to 3 years to embed the regime, embrace it, and also consider the cultural considerations. So how are you going to communicate with staff, educate them around the requirements of the senior managers and certification regime, but more broadly around the conduct requirements. Culturally, how do you want to be perceived in the market? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, very interesting.
Thank you.
Yes, very good. Thank you.